Hello, everybody. Oh, and I can see people are watching me, so that's very exciting. Apologies for the very long lead in. If you were on Facebook, you will have seen me reset the timer from twice, I think. But I think it's quite good because it helps people find me. So, welcome, my dears, to this very first episode of Knit TV. I finally brought it back. It's the new version of the Get Knit Done podcast. You're going to see me looking a little bit to the side though, because I'm just like, oh, where is everybody? I'm just making sure I lean here to the left so that I can see the chat. I am going to have to get do. If you are joining me on YouTube or on Facebook, you may need to let Restream see your comments, but I am flicking back and forth between the two streams as well. So I'm kind of like I'm live everywhere. But I have this tool that allows me to do fun stuff. So I can have a banner. And I haven't had a banner before, so I'm very excited. And I'm going to have to lean slightly to the left to see them and then change them. Now I can see them. I can see them all. And I just do one little tiny flick. Right, okay. So if you are commenting or questions or anything like that, do ask them here. I have a chat. Honestly, so many things you can do with this. So here we are. I'm so glad. Welcome to the very first episode of Knit. I'm going to start again. So that you can get like, what is she talking about? So, my dears, welcome. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the very first episode of the Knit TV. It's the replacement for the Getting It Done podcast because I wanted to come to YouTube and bring you a video podcast. It's taken me a little while to move across though because I wanted to get everything right. And I have been testing tools and making sure that everything is set up and kind of thinking what would be most useful to everybody. And I'm delighted to say that we are finally here. So every Thursday, British Standard Time, summertime for now, 7 p.m. Thursday nights, I will be here. I hope you'll be here with me. We'll have a variety of things. So sometimes it'll be demos of techniques and I'll talk about kind of what you can expect from the show as well. Have some notes. So I will now check those out. So let me just check for comments because I know that just in case people are not able to see. Right, okay, so no comments at the moment, which is perfect, I guess, because it means I'm not seeing anything. Right, okay, so enough of that. So let me tell you about what you can expect. So we're going to have a couple of sections. So every week we'll have like, so you know kind of what's coming up. I have an on my needles and on my, oh yay, hi Steph. I'm so glad. Yay, and Karen, oh my, they're coming through. You guys are awesome. So yay, I can now see them on this. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for commenting because actually it means I can see them. Oh, and I have a Facebook user, so that just means actually you can comment from Facebook. I just won't know who you are, which is actually perfect because I still see them and you still keep your privacy because I know not everybody wants to share their comments. Hi, Andrina. Oh, I'm so glad. Yay, that's brilliant. So it is coming through. Ah, you know when you set these things up, you don't know if they're going to work or not. Right, my dears. Back again. So the first thing is what's on my needles and what yarns I've been kind of buying recently and kind of what I've been testing out and things like that. I think that will hopefully be very useful. I'm also going to talk about then I have it around the community. So what's happening in the knit school or not knit school, the everybody community. Hi everybody, by the way, thank you for joining. Hi Kelly. Hi other Facebook users. You're popping up on my screen. I can't see your names. I feel really ignorant, but it's all right. I can see you guys. So what's on my needles and then what's going on around the community so I can talk about some of the kind of knit alongs that I found or patterns that are released or even just what people are talking about because I know that I spend too much time looking at things in the knitting community and it might be useful for you to know what they are as well because I know that not everybody's lives are. I wish they all were, but I know that many of you have other lives outside knitting. I mean, what? So there's that too. And then I'm going to have a knitting chat. And that is where I'd like to teach you or help you learn or answer your questions about knitting. So this week, we're going to be talking about knitting patterns because I think it's something we don't talk about a lot. And I want to dive into those as well. I also want to do that over a number of episodes, but you guys can let me know if you'd like that or not. And then I'm going to do some techniques and we'll do loads of things over the course of the year. So that's kind of dedicated to knitting. Then I'm going to have an Ask Me Anything knitting questions. You can also ask me personal questions, although I'm not entirely sure. I don't have that exciting a life, so I'm not entirely sure that's of any use to you. It's definitely not like an expose style thing, but there isn't actually anything to expose. And then I'm going to tell you what's going to come up next week, and that is what we're going to be doing. So, hi to everybody. I'm so delighted to have you here, and it's great. I can actually see YouTube comments and I can see Facebook comments all together in one place now, so I'm really pleased. So, with that said, I'm going to just have a quick lean over. I definitely need a little. a little dashboard. I'm going to move to on my needles. I know, I know. I've been trying them out and I've been like looking at different things. Oh my goodness, which is my favorite cat? Oh no. That's really bold. That's such a bold question, Facebook user who has not told me through. Like, you probably that's why. Who's my favorite cat? Maud is my favorite cat. And Jim and Norm and Danny, they're all my favorites, she says. So, what is on my needles? Let's start there. So, on my needles right now, very, very little. I have this project. So what I've been doing, I should talk about it because this is going to be another episode. I have been testing commercial sock yarns because I know that not everybody uses hand-dyed yarn, and with sock yarn, sometimes you want a really good solid color and you want to just buy a flat color yarn. So it's this is Opal. This is I have a band for it somewhere. Don't worry, I haven't talked away yet. It's a Rico actually. This is the Lovecraft's paint box. This is Lang Yarns, and this is King Cole. I'm just giving them all a bit of a test actually because I want to try them all. I want to know what ones are really good, what ones people will really like, and I want to test them out and tell you. So that's one thing that's on my needles. I've just cast that on last night. I was trying to get to know whips. No works in progress if you don't know what that is, but I failed. I had to cast something else on. So that's what I'm on my needles there. And then I have my one other project. I know one other project. It's been actually, except for this thing, that needs to be ripped out. But I'm not counting that as a whip because it's going to happen. This is a changing light. So the pattern is by, oh, that's very bad. Take out pattern, have a look. She's very good. And I'll actually put it in, I don't know the front page. It's called Changing Light. I think she might be, I'll have to check. I'll put it into the show notes. I'll put it into the description below once I found it. But you'll find her as Changing Light. I've definitely talked about it before, and this is my, I want to say like the third of them. It's super cute. It starts in the center and you knit out in kind of fading colors. I've made it slightly bigger, so I added an extra repeat to the centerpiece. And I've done it in an undyed yarn, so I have a kind of a dark yak, a grey, pale grey alpaca, and then a white cream alpaca. And I have to say, it is glorious. I think I'm going to give it to my mom for her birthday. And I hope she's not watching me live because I know they're away. So I think I can say that. So that's that. And then the third thing that will be on my needles probably as soon as this is over is this yarn, which is kind of I raided my mom's stash. It's a Sostran green. I've never knit with it before. I'll post details of it. It's another commercial yarn. And I'm going to knit Helen Stewart's Sock Society sock that came out this morning. I've never done one of Helen's Sock Society kind of knit alongs. I think this is her fifth, but I've been very tempted. I think I have definitely got other patterns of hers. I'm really looking forward to casting them on. The pattern is gorgeous. If you search just Helen Stewart, if you're in the mood for some great socks, I think the price for them now, she did them on an early bird special of like about 10 or 11 pounds, but now they're 18 pounds. Still 6 sock patterns for 18 pounds is unbelievable value. Plus she has a community and Ravelry for it. So I'm casting those on. So I think it's kind of a boring yarn, but I think it's going to look unbelievable in the pattern. Talk more about Helen's knit along in just a moment. So that's what's on my needles. I thought as well in this, I might talk about yarns I might have, purchased. Although I have to admit, I've been very restrained, not good, because there's no good is irrelevant. I've been restrained because I've been trying to work out what to knit next. But I went astray at home. First of all, I went into my mom's stash and she allowed me. I know she has quite the stash. So I got this Alpaca Luxury sock. It's a sport weight sock yarn. So that's quite exciting. And I'm going to knit those. I'll talk about some charity knits actually. I might add that in as well at some point to the podcast. But I've taken my mom's sock yarn to turn them into socks for a charity project that my mom is involved in. And then I have this, which I also stole. Some of you will be very familiar with the For the Love of Yarn. So my mom had one skein and I was like, I am stealing it. And then I have also bought these from Bantry Yarns. If you are in Ireland, if you're in West Cork, please visit Bantry Yarns. It is amazing. She's the loveliest person in the entire world. So yeah, I treat myself to socks, yeah. And you're probably thinking, you used to sell that. Well, I never sold anything I didn't love. So I love this. And it's the kind of ballet pink in the 4-ply. It is the Lapidolite. So yeah, that's really pretty. And actually it's coming up quite color. Looking at the screen, it looks quite good. So it's I want to design a pair of socks, and that's so very luckily I have my 2.25 mil needle bought because I don't have a sock wonder in it. I bought them for the design for that, and perfectly they work with Helen's pattern, so I'll have to put the design off for a little minute. Hi Ben, hi Karen, hi, Linda. Oh yeah, Karen. Sock Society as well. Yeah, I fancied knitting someone else's patterns as well. I needed a change. I'm tired of myself. That's a great advertisement for myself, isn't it? And then I bought these. I know, I know. And again, I always stocked what I loved, so I could not resist these. This is Autumn and Twist, and this is Harbour, and I just could you not buy them together, and you can just see the gold is just picked up. I don't know if I'm going to turn those into socks because one of the bases is one is a twist sock, which is fine. The other is I think it's a moon, which is wool silk. So I am I don't know what to do with them yet. I don't know if they're going to become socks or if they're going to become a design, or actually they might become a design because life in the Lawgrass, who does not want it? Like, I mean, look how beautiful it is. So that is really what's on my needles and my new yarns. I do have a project for blocking. I'm waiting for the right weather though. So I'm gonna hang on for that. That is the Cadson by Anakin Ellis. And I am waiting for that to yeah, I'm waiting for that to come through as a better I need a better day for that. So that's it. That's enough babbling about that. So yeah, Karen, a good sport weight. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It's kind of fluffy, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I let you know how it goes as well. I might add that into my sock test. So I'm going to test all those sock yarns. I must decide in a fair test as well, of course, but we shall see. Next up, knitting chat. So I'm going to I really do need a different thing. So we're going to do around the community. Honestly, I can do so many fun things with this. I think I was entertaining myself. So things that are going on. Obviously, Helen's Horror Sock Society has started today. So the first pattern came out, and there's one pattern a month for 6 months. First time I've done it, and a bit like Karen was saying, it's really nice to knit something that you haven't designed. It kind of sometimes when I was in the shop, it's always the pressure to knit samples. So it's lovely to knit other things. And I think that's one of the things actually since I've closed the shop, I find myself knitting for pleasure again, which is so good because like I mean my first love is knitting, so it would be great if I had to give it up totally. So that's the first thing. The next thing is everybody's talking about AI, so I thought I would talk about it as well. So artificial intelligence, for those of you who are so I guess I see a lot of it because I spend a lot of my time, like part of my other business is looking at technology and how it impacts business and what use it is. But I also love to have a play with it from and everyone is talking about it, some of it so you kind of have to look at it from two perspectives. One is the damage it's going to do, and the other is the positive thing it is. And for me, I'm always a bit like, I need to understand it so that I can understand the possibilities for it. And some people say that it will only have negative consequences, and some people say it will only have positive. I think it'll have both. The jury's out on how, I don't know enough about it to make a kind of a mystic prediction about it, but I do think it'll have an impact on certain things. The good news for knit that we're designers is it's one of the funds that people are using, and you hear people talking about it. It's called ChatGPT. So if you go to Google and search that, don't just type in chatgpt.com because that's not the site. If you want to use it, try ChatGPT. Just search it in Google, and there's a link. And I asked it to produce some knitting patterns. The good news is that it's not very good at knitting patterns. Now, people are saying that it will improve, but I'm glad to say that right now it is not replacing me. And if it does, well, I'm hoping that people will still prefer me to the AI. That jury is out on that though. So yeah, that's the first thing is right now it's not writing the knitting patterns. But then a really interesting, Louise Tilbrook in her Facebook group and on her email list was saying about the Gotham knits. And I hadn't heard about that at all. And now they've generated pictures using one of the other AI tools that you can generate like fake pictures. So it's becoming harder and harder to tell what's real and what's not, particularly in pictures. And I have to say I agree with that because I saw those pictures that were going around of the Pope. And the Pope's lifestyle brand. And obviously, I was raised in an Irish household, so I was obviously Catholic educated. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, that's a departure for the Pope. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was like, those aren't real. I was like, he's not going to be wearing a white puffer jacket. So you have those moments where you're like, that's an interesting kind of move, and then you're like, no. So yeah, it is becoming more and more tricky to see what's real. But I'm hoping we can keep it real in the yarn community. But yeah, do before you buy like fascinating yarns online from slightly biased companies, do have a think about it. And actually, that takes me quite well into the other thing that's going on in the yarn community as well that people are talking about a lot is advent calendar pre-orders. So this is an interesting one in that if you haven't heard about it, what happens is that it's this time of year. Dyers need to know in advance kind of how much money they're going to have to buy bases, how many yarn calendars they're going to have to dye. And yes, it's Christmas of next year, but or Christmas coming. Well, Christmas, or if you celebrate secular or religious Christmas, depending on whichever one you want, they need to have numbers because it's time consuming. They need to pre order boxes, bits, everything, and all kinds of bits like that. The problem with it is that in consumer law protection, particularly in the UK, now I'm going to talk about the UK and Ireland because I know that a little bit better, but I don't know, so it'll vary by country, is that if you buy something on a prepayment after, I think it's 180 days with PayPal, and I'm not entirely sure for credit cards, your protection as a consumer runs out. So there's that balance between dyers needing them to know they need numbers and they need to have security to take deposits and things because once they start spending money, they have money spent, and consumer protection. So, what I would say for that is look at people's track records to start. Now, that's not very fair for brand new dyers, but to be fair, if you're a brand new dyer entering the Advent market, good luck to you. My goodness, I was never tempted. I have to say, it is hard, hard work. And I think you have to earn your stripes a little bit as well for that. So I would look at the track record of dyers who have delivered successful Advent calendars in the past. You know, you have dyers like, I'm going to name Lisa because she's my favorite. Lisa from For the Love of Yarn, Abby from Luxury Yarns, and then some of the other big dyers who have consistently delivered great advent calendars over the years. So that's one thing, is to look at people's history of delivering quality advent calendars if you're going to. And then you can contact dyers and ask them if they will allow you to give a deposit, or if you can, just pay in payment installments and everything like that. Do look at how you protect yourself, but also there are dyers out there with great track records and you have no worries about dealing with them. So it's that fine balance between, business need on one side, which is a huge thing for dyers. Nobody wants to die. Like, say, for example, if you die, if you take the risk and you dye 50 advent calendars and you can't sell them in September, then that's a huge outlay. So again, I'm very much I'm on both sides because I used to work for a number of financial institutions, looking after kind of consumer rights. Well, not looking after them, but making sure that we were compliant with them, and I get that too. So yes, definitely want to cautiously purchase them. I have not purchased one. I think anyone who's known me for a while will know that not this year, the year before last, I may have opened all of my Advent yarns on the 4th of December. So I'm not allowed to have an Advent anymore. Yes, oh, that's that's it. And I think you can actually buy non-Advents. So there are people who are doing non-Advents as well, because I see someone said Advents are a trigger. Yeah, I suppose they're only a trigger if we don't kind of have a nice kind of view that nobody is, most people, not all, most people are not, most dyers are definitely not out to take your money and run off, I think is probably fair. But then there are unforeseen circumstances in every business. But yeah, it's that balance between looking after yourself and making sure you have an advent calendar. I'm not allowed one. Yep, so that's it. I'm not ordering one. Although I have to say I've been very tempted by Marna of Cutting Biogs, everything, all of hers and Lisa's, and all of them, and I'm not buying one. See later episode where I buy one. So yeah, that is what's going on around the industry. I'd love to hear other people's news as well. So if you have anything that I've missed, there's loads of things. Oh, Westmit's Yarn Long, I believe, is starting as well. I know some of the people in my Knit Matters Facebook group have joined, and the yarns look awesome. They're very pretty, I have to say. Not tempted by that though, because I'm not allowed to do those either anymore. So next thing, and I'm gonna just sneak by, and we're gonna start knitting chat. Oh, you've no idea. I feel like I'm in a TVC studio. The lights are making me shiny, which I think is what would actually happen if we were in a studio as well. So I wanted to talk about knitting patterns because I I suppose something that through knit school I have learned that it's a skill we're not teaching. Now I cover it in my Learn to Knit, but I'm now now after lockdown and after a lot of people have found knitting through, they're following YouTube tutorials, which the more the merrier for knitting. They're following YouTube tutorials where you're being shown every stitch, and that's great. The only problem is that knitting on one hand and pattern reading on the other are they're kind of essential to one another if you want to progress your knitting. There's nothing wrong with casting on and knitting and enjoying it, but if you want to be able to make what you see in patterns, you have to be able to read them. And I know for some of you, you're thinking that is just common sense, but in a way, that's not very fair because knitting is taught piecemeal. You find a video and you do your best with it, or you learn one pattern and you go with that, and it's not taught because I was taught in school, so I learned way back when it was still taught as a subject, not a subject but as a part of the school kind of arts and crafts, I guess. So I learned how to read patterns then, and then it's a kind of a lifetime skill that you get. And I think it's just something I want to talk about, and I'm going to do a series of them as part of these episodes before I get on to doing some other techniques. I hope that interests everybody. It might not. You may learn something, you may not. I hope so, though. So I thought I would start with things that, like, as a basic guide for anyone who hasn't learned how to read patterns before, and even actually if you are using a lot of patterns. Um, there are things that you can do that will make it easier next time as well. A little bit, it's a bit geeky, but you know what? I'm all about the like geeking out on the knitting. So the first thing I would say is there's one thing is you want to learn the abbreviations and symbols that come in knitting charts and and knitting patterns. And you're thinking, I don't want to learn them all off. You don't have to. It's just when you start a pattern, be familiar with what the designer is saying. So if you dive straight into the pattern without looking at the abbreviation section, you may it can be very overwhelming because there might be something unfamiliar, you might not know what it is. So it's always good to actually look at the abbreviations. Like even me, when I downloaded Helen's pattern, they're the shadow box socks. Actually, I'm looking at the pattern here beside me. I looked at the abbreviations to see if there was anything I hadn't seen before. And that's kind of a good idea because if you haven't seen it before, it can be it can throw you. And even as someone who's been knitting for many years, I'm like, what is that? Plus, that's the first thing I would say. The second thing as part of that is to recognize that there is officially no standard of abbreviations. And I've seen a lot of people online talking about this recently, and people are getting very cross with the designers. But the truth is, there is no standard body for it. There's no standardization. Most of us will design, when I started designing, I designed my own abbreviation list with my tech editor. Well, I didn't start. Over time, with my tech editor, I have developed my own list of abbreviations that make sense, that work for my patterns, and that are broadly in line with the standards that everybody else is using. So the stitch is telling you to do the same thing, but the language around it will be different because I wrote my own definitions that I thought were more suitable or the best suitable. There isn't a standard list. So that's something to be aware of as well, is that you may see non-standard things in patterns. Always check what the designer of that pattern is telling you to do because it might be different. So what you think is one thing might be totally different to the designer. Slip slip knits are one of those things, and that's a very standard stitch, not alone talking about the further out stitches that you could be learning as well. So that's the first thing. And also you can buy dictionaries of them if you want to get familiar with them at a big push. I'm gonna very carefully, here it is. I sorted my books alphabetically so that I can find them. So this is Kate Atterley's knitting dictionary. Doesn't have everything, but when it comes to like the intensity of knowing things, Kate, you can't go wrong with Kate. For anything she teaches, I have all. I think I have most of, if not all of her books. She is a phenomenal woman. So yeah, she has that. So that's just something. The next thing, if you are new to patterns as well, as read through them. I know I'm definitely going to get eye rolls for saying that. But do read through them because before you start, because then you can know when something bad is going to happen to you. Not that anything bad is going to happen to you, but I remember my first pattern where there was a steek in it. I'm happily knitting away, happily knitting. Came to the steek and went, oh, I don't really. They were like, insert some extra stitches, that'll be the steek panel, and then you just cut those. And I was like, and it was written by a lady, Arlene Oftel. I have her book behind me somewhere as well. Oftel. Anyway, she wrote Norwegian. It's an awesome book, and she is Norwegian. So her knitting tradition is that you'll just know how to do this, like, because Norwegian knitters speak like the rest of us breathe. I know that's like, is that like a stereotype, but it is. It's a positive one. But so when I came to that steak, I was like, what is happening to me here? I was like, what is this? So yeah, so you don't get surprises, I guess. And if you have a deadline with something, you definitely don't want to come upon a surprise. So yeah, it's just good to know, but don't let that put you off either. It's kind of a balance as well. So then there's lots of other things like one section at a time, etc. But there's some other things that you can do then as well is know what your own good looks like. So over time, develop an idea of what you want from a pattern, and then you will be able to assess designers based on that. So do they, like, do they write in a style that you like? Are they in a format that you want to read them in? Do they provide the level of detail you need? So, for example, this is one of, I'm going to just flash it up. I don't want to show it. This is Helen's Shadowbox Socks. You'll see very quickly, I'm going to put that down. She does an individual row by row checklist. I'm really excited to try it. I've never done it. I think she's actually patented it as a trademarked it, which is absolutely the right thing to do. It's definitely her format. And I'm dying to see that. But I think for me, that might be a little bit too much. But for other people who are starting out, that might be absolutely perfect. You may also find that they change as you go as well. That, you know, what you like, what you need in a pattern changes over time as well. So maybe I need less detail than I used to, but I still, you know, I'll still need quite a bit of detail. Like I won't pick up, for example, a Norwegian sweater pattern and be very comfortable with the fact that it says, you know, knit the sweater. They don't say that. That's unfair. But it's the quality of knitters, I guess. There. So or actually yes. For example, Latvian mittens. My most popular blog post on the Lovely Sarah Company site, which I am migrating to the Knit School page at the moment, is the how to knit Latvian mittens, because there's a lot of assumed knowledge in that, which is fine. But that level works for people and it doesn't. So it's about knowing what's good for you, knowing designers you like, people who are really consistent, reading the comments in a pattern before you start is really important. And something I would say, if you love I love a list, and I like to learn why I'm doing something as well. So when you are doing something in knitting, ask yourself why. Why am I shaping this way as opposed to another way? Why am I splitting here? Why is this length that way? And when you ask yourself those questions when you're knitting a pattern, it gets you familiar with not just that one pattern, but it makes the knowledge transferable to other patterns. And that'll really speed up the speed at which you get like knitting pattern understanding. And I know that that sounds like study, but you know, knitting is not just a craft. You know, it's not, knitting is a skill. It's it's one of those things that you develop over time. And I don't want to insult any other craft. I'm trying to think of a craft that I don't want to name a craft in case I offend somebody, but let's say I'm going to say scrapbooking. I'm not saying that like scrapbooking is a really artistic, amazing thing to do, and you can get really into it and print all your bits, and it's unbelievably fun, I believe. Like I know a number of people who scrapbook. But the thing is that things like cutting, sticking, and you know, placing onto the thing and buying photos and, you know, taking photos and putting them into a scrapbook, it's very different to something like knitting. Knitting actually is a skill that requires you to think about it over time. Now I'm not saying, oh man, I'm going to upset scrapbookers, but you know, there is a difference. There's like the learning curve for knitting is much higher, in the same way that the learning curve for like astrophysics is like probably straight up, you know. So it's okay for things to require a different level of knowledge. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, that you do need to, the more effort you put into it, the more you will get out of it as well, without ruining it for yourself. Don't ruin it for yourself. So yeah, maybe a little notebook about what you learned in one pattern and what you'll be able to bring on to the knowledge that you kind of accrue for knitting. So yeah, that's my thing. Let me see. And always ask is the other thing. There is no stupid questions with knitting. Like if you don't understand something in a pattern and it doesn't make sense to you, always ask somebody. Because you might think, oh, this is going to be really obvious, but it does. Why would it be obvious to you? You know, it's okay to ask, and sometimes patterns are wrong or the designer isn't being clear. So yeah, that is something to look at as well. It's not always your fault as well. You know, as a designer, there are times when my tech editor, who is, I speak about her like she's one of the loves of my life. I think she must be very uncomfortable actually. I just love her. She's amazing. Deb at Find Me Knitting is an amazing tech editor. She'll send me my pattern's back and she said, "That's not clear. Like, what are you doing here? No one will be able to knit that. It's not good enough." Well, she doesn't really say that, but that's how I interpret it. Um, and sometimes designers might not have a good tech editor, or they might not have a tech editor at all. And they might be the kindest, loveliest, amazingest designers in the world, but pattern writing might not also be their skill. So there's kind of there is actually a difference between designing and pattern writing. But that is a topic for a different discussion. So that is where we are at the moment, my dears. I just wanted to share that. So things like learning your abbreviations and symbols, but knowing that they can be different, that there isn't really a standard, reading through them, knowing what your good looks like is really important. Find designers you like, and then also learn and apply not just one pattern, know how to use it for the next one. I think that's kind of accrued knowledge, which is great. And then ask, always ask. And if you're stuck, Knit Matters Facebook group is a great place to start. A little bit of a pitch there. So that's it, my dears, for that. I'm going to do maybe 2 or 3 minutes of a Q&A. I'm going to have a little bit of a look through the comments. I'm going to just veer left. I'm going to go to Ask Me Anything. Ha, it's back. I know. So I'm 5. So yeah, if anyone has any questions. So Andrina, yes, absolutely. I can put in the links to the books. I recommended Kate's book, and yep, I will absolutely. I'll put in a link to that. I'll try to find it from an indie shop. I believe I bought mine possibly from Wild and Woolly. But I will have a look, and I'll post some links underneath this video in both here and in YouTube, and both in Facebook as well, because I'm going live in both, which is very exciting. So yeah, if anyone has any knitting questions, I won't hold too long. What's my favorite garment to knit other than socks? Oh, that's a great question. Love note sweaters. Which I'm actually wearing at the moment, and I'm promising myself another one because I keep wearing the same two over and over. So yeah, I like a sweater, actually, if I'm honest. Yeah, I like garments, like actual sweaters. Not a great cardigan wearer, although I knit a lot of Tin Can Knits Lush cardigans, which were really nice. I think part of my problem, I never had enough time to knit garments when I was um, with knit school, because there's always small things. Yes, Jacqueline, it is. Love note. And yeah, I see other people are agreeing. Yes, this is the love note. I'm not entirely sure. I think I did the neckline as required, although I might have put an I-cord cast off in mine. It is the love note. I think it must be one of my favorite sweaters of all time. I think it's everybody's favorite sweater of all time. Well, it's not, but it's pretty close, I think. It's easy to knit. Tin Can Knits patterns are beautifully laid out and very well explained. And it's not the most expensive sweater you can make, because it doesn't use, like, you're talking about maybe up to maximum of 300 grams of ply plus the mohair that goes with it. And actually, something I must do is I want to test commercial mohair. Although, to be fair, it is priced very similar to hand-dyed mohair, and that's because the process, which mohair is not that most common fiber. And yeah, so it's exciting. Karen, you really need to knit one. Yes. A baggy cast off. So I actually cast mine. So if it's not a love note, I think the love note is actually technically cast off with I think it's a rib cast off. I did mine with an I-cord cast off on mine, and it has held the shape really well, because an I-cord, if you don't so when you're casting off the I-cord, you can make them looser by doing extra repeats of the I-cord piece without attaching them to the knit. So say I knit my stitch and I cast one off in the I-cord cast off, I can then actually do a row of I-cord before I go on and do the next stitch in the cast off. So you can create them much bigger. But if you want to keep an edge kind of tight, you can then just cast off all the stitches quite densely. And I find that works quite well. If you are using a rib cast off and you want it to be loose but not too loose, I find that doing a partial version, and you'll find Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off is a search if you do it on YouTube. She uses a yarn over between each stitch that she casts off, so that gives you a really stretchy edge. But if you want to kind of create a sort of a stretch, do one every second stitch, so you don't have to have a yarn over between each stitch as you cast them off. Have one in between each one, and that will create a stretchy but not flared edge, because it's really easy with a rib stitch to get a flare. It took me ages to decide, because it's one of the reasons I don't knit toe-up socks that often, is I don't like the way the cast-offs look. That has made me happier. If you want a more dense cast-off, that is a little bit less stretchy again. The one I found recently is a suspended cast off. And what that does is you knit one stitch, you then knit the next stitch, and you take the first stitch over the second, but you don't slip the second stitch off your left needle until you have slipped the stitch over. And it's really, I will demonstrate it on this for sure. That creates a lovely edge because it gives you a little bit of control over how big the stitch you make the stitches. So yeah, I think that's something I'm really, yeah, that's a good cast off as well if you don't want things to be very loose. Oh, yeah, I love ticking things off as well, Jacqueline. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm like, oh, this is very good because I always like I will create an Excel spreadsheet if I'm doing something like I when I was knitting the Cadson, which I have to say I just loved knitting it. Um, Cadson sweater, Cadson. Um, the Cadson sweater. It's super. I kept a checklist because you need the sides to match as well. So Charlotte, is that the suspended cast off? My dear, I know you are a knit school member, so you will be able to find it inside knit school. And actually, yeah, if I have any knit school members watching as well, you guys can let me know and I can link you to some of the tutorials that are in knit school as well. So that is it, I think. Unless anyone has any more questions, in which case you can post them on here and I'll be back and reading the comments later on. But I think I've used 40 minutes of your night. So thank you so much for joining me for this very first episode. Next week, I am going to be back. We'll be covering the same kind of areas. But I will be talking about the starts of knitting patterns. So I'm actually going to show you some of my own patterns and kind of what I try to include in them and how to read that and how to interpret it. Now, I know for some of you, that's probably, that ship has sailed, and that's okay because knitting is something that, we all kind of come to it at different levels. And I think that's one of the best things about it. So I'm going to talk about, how to pick the right size, how to knit for gauge, how to, what needles to use with the yarn, which is something I learned recently from Carson Demers, who spoke at Knit School, and he talked about how needle and yarn pairing is so important. Ergo I Knit is his website. I'll post it in the comments. I'll have to go back and I'll be a little minute adding those because I must go back and check everything. He talks a lot about yeah, needle pairing with yarn. And I'm really glad to be able to talk about that in Paris next week. We'll talk about a few other bits. And then over the next few weeks then as well, I'm actually going to show you some of those real oddities in knitting patterns and how it looks when you actually knit them. So we might do a bit of reverse all shaping. Nobody loves reverse all shaping. And things about like, knit this row and then the alternative 89 rows and then do a handstand. So I'm going to cover those as well. I thought I'd start with that. I thought I'd start reading back the basics with Go into TV and then we'll kind of progress on from there. So that's it, my dears. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a lovely rest of your evening. And I'm going to work out how to end my life. Take care, everybody. I hope you have enjoyed this episode.